Welcome to Inspired Edge from Fear to Faith Filled Living. I'm your host, Chuck Keller. Today, I want to talk about something that quietly influences a lot of the decisions that we make in life, and that is fear. Now, when most people hear the word fear, they picture something obvious, something dramatic, maybe standing on the edge of a cliff, speaking in front of a large audience, or facing a major life crisis. But the reality is, fear rarely shows up in such obvious ways. In fact, most of the time, fear is much more subtle. It doesn't usually walk into the room and introduce itself by saying, "Hello, I'm fear." Instead, fear tends to show up in disguise. And because it's disguised, we often don't recognize that it's influencing our thinking and shaping our decisions. One of the most common ways that fear shows up is through procrastination. You know something needs to be done. Maybe it's a decision you need to make, a conversation you need to have. Maybe it's taking a step towards something God has been putting on your heart, but somehow it keeps getting pushed off. You tell yourself, I'll get to that later. Now isn't the right time. Or I just need to think about it a little more. Now, sometimes that's legitimate, but many times procrastination is simply fear in disguise. Another way that fear shows up is through overthinking. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to get stuck analyzing every possible outcome? You start running through scenarios in your mind. What if this goes wrong? What if I make the wrong decision? What if people don't respond well? And before long, the analysis becomes endless. And instead of moving forward, you stay stuck. Again, it can feel like you're being thoughtful or careful. But sometimes what's really happening is that fear is quietly taking the steering wheel. Fear also shows up through busyness. This one is especially interesting because on the surface, being busy can look productive. You're working hard, you're checking things off your list, you're staying active. But sometimes busyness becomes a way to avoid the things that actually matter most. You stay busy with tasks so you don't have to face the deeper decision or step of faith in front of you. And then there's avoiding difficult conversations. Many people carry conversations that they know they need to have. Conversation with your spouse, with a good friend, with a coworker, or maybe even a conversation about boundaries that need to be set. But those conversations feel uncomfortable. So we delay them. We tell ourselves it's probably not that big of a deal, or maybe it will work itself out. But often the real reason is fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of how the other person might respond. Another reason that fear can be so tricky is it often masquerades as wisdom or responsibility. People will say things like, I'm just being cautious, or I'm trying to think everything through. Now, there is certainly value in being thoughtful and wise, but sometimes what feels like caution is actually fear keeping us from stepping forward. And if we're not careful, fear can slowly start shaping the direction of our lives. It will influence the opportunities we pursue, the conversations we avoid, the risks we never take, the calling we never step into. And sometimes we don't even realize it's happening. One of the things I love about scripture is how honest it is about fear. Throughout the whole Bible, we see people facing uncertainty, facing obstacles, facing situations where the outcome wasn't guaranteed. And one verse that speaks directly into this is Joshua 1:9, which says, Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. And do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, that verse is powerful, but it's important to notice something. God didn't tell Joshua, to be courageous because there was nothing to fear. Joshua had a massive responsibility in front of him. He was stepping into leadership after Moses. He was leading the people into unfamiliar territory. There was plenty of uncertainty, but God's instruction was still clear: be strong and courageous. Why? Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to trust God despite uncertainty. It's moving forward with faith, even when the outcome isn't fully clear. And that's an important distinction, because if we wait until fear disappears before we act, we may wait a very long time. One of the simple exercises I share with people in coaching is this: what decision might I make if fear were not influencing me right now? It's a powerful question because it helps to bring hidden fears into the light. Sometimes when we pause and really consider it, we realize something, that there's a step that we've been sensing for a while, or maybe it's reaching out to someone, maybe it's pursuing an opportunity, maybe it's setting a boundary, maybe it's stepping into a calling that God has placed on our heart. But fear has been quietly whispering reasons to stay where things feel safe. And when you ask yourself that question honestly, it can reveal a lot, not to shame yourself, but to bring awareness. And awareness is often the first step toward freedom. And then when faith enters the picture, something shifts. Faith doesn't eliminate the uncertainty, but it changes where we place our trust. And instead of asking, what if this goes wrong? Faith begins asking, what if God is leading me here? Instead of focusing only on potential failure, faith begins focusing on God's presence and guidance. Remember that promise in Joshua 1:9? For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And that promise changes the equation, because it means we are never stepping forward alone. So let me leave you with a simple reflection today. Take a moment and ask yourself, where might fear be quietly shaping your choices right now? Is there something you've been postponing, something you've been overthinking, a conversation you've been avoiding, maybe a step of faith that keeps coming to mind, but you've been hesitant to take action? You don't have to solve everything today, but simply bringing awareness to it is a powerful step. And as you reflect on it, remember this: courage doesn't mean fear disappears. Courage means choosing to trust God and move forward anyway. If you've been feeling stuck in burnout, fear, or just unsure of what your next step should be, I created something that may really help. It's called the 5 Life Keys, a faith based framework for breaking free from burnout and fear based living. This short guide will help you understand the 5 areas that often shape our lives the most: clarity, confidence, focus, faith, and purpose. And it's designed to help you reset your thinking and reconnect with the direction God may be calling you toward. You can download it for free through the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening today to Inspired Edge: From Fear to Faith-Filled Living. If this episode encouraged you, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who could use the same encouragement. And remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I'll see you in the next episode.